So we're going to move on now to Brexit and sustainability in Northern Ireland. And I should say I must apologise for the previous session in it being a panel of an all-male, all-beardy male panel. It wasn't meant to be that, but a female speaker who we had lined up wasn't able to come along. But we have a little bit more gender balance in this one, so I have tried consciously to design.
Which meant that after the vote, there was a very big fear that this referendum would lead to deregulation across the UK and to lowering of environmental standards. Now, so there was a group of Conservative MPs, James Mogg, Michael Gove, asking business to draw up hit lists. What do you want to get rid of? So that was just straight after the referendum, and so it kind of raised a lot of concerns. Now it looks like the winds have changed. We now have a new Michael Gove in DEFRA, and this is much more about this unfrozen moment, this green Brexit, this moment where we can seize Brexit as an opportunity to make Britain greener. Now, I mentioned Britain because, of course, in his green Brexit moment, in big speech, he didn't mention devolution once, and Northern Ireland really didn't feature much either. So there is still a lot of concerns around this green Brexit, which appears to perhaps be a green Brexit for England, and doesn't really consider the fact that the environment in this country is not just a central London matter. So I'm just going to talk quickly about key challenges that I think are still very, very big for the environment, to make sure that Brexit doesn't wreck the environment across Europe, because I don't think Brexit is just a challenge for the environment in the UK, but it also creates challenges across Europe. So the key concerns we have right now, and I'm sure the other speakers will speak about them as well, is around the EU withdrawal bill. So these huge attempt of copy-pasting all of the EU environmental policy into UK law. There's questions also about common frameworks, and finally again about devolution, always forgotten. Now the EU withdrawal bill gives, to quote again, I think the House of Lords this time, saying that it gives ministers the largest power of peacetime history that you've ever had. It just creates incredible precedent in terms of giving so much power to ministers. Not just any ministers, only the ministers who happen to sit in London. Devolved ministers do not get the same amount of power, right? So it's all about the idea that we have all these powers right now in Brussels that are being sent back or taken back control. The question is, where does that control fall? For now, the proposal is that everything goes back to London, until London decides very carefully which powers should go further to the devolved. We don't know when. There's lots of sunset clauses in the withdrawal bill. That means, these extra powers are only given for a special time. But around the withdrawal, around the devolution elements, there's no sunset clause. That means London can just keep all these powers for a very, very long time if it wants to. Now that's very, very problematic, because right now what you had is EU environmental policy, which is very, very hard to roll back. You need a huge amount of consensus among member states, huge amount of consensus within the European Parliament to cut any kind of policy. And what you have is you put this, you take it from Brussels, and you give it not only to Westminster, but to Whitehall. You give it to just ministers who could just cut through it with just one minister instead of 28 countries. So in terms of protection for environmental policy, there's a really, really big fear here of just too much power given to the executive. The solution, the idea is that we can't, of course, environment is one of these clear areas for international cooperation. So of course the idea that we would have radically different policies across all 4 nations of the UK is problematic. Because you have questions in which, issues in which you would want to have common frameworks, you would want to have common policies. Now the problem here again is what makes a common framework, who decides when a common framework is needed, and how do we agree common frameworks? Here again the position from the London government is, Westminster is there to decide common frameworks, and the devolved will implement them differently. The Welsh and the Scottish government agreed together and submitted joint amendments, something that's never happened before, saying no, we just have the powers to the devolved, and we'll agree common frameworks for governments around the table talking about the issues. The Welsh government, being extremely naughty here, is suggesting that we should have a UK Council of Ministers. As the UK leaves the EU, we should just import some of the EU's institutions within the UK constitutional framework. Not sure that's going to fly, but it does show that Brexit is not just about redrawing how we work with the EU or how we have how how we work in an international stage. It's also changing how the UK should work, at least. So there's going to be lots of discussion about the role of the devolved, and perhaps even moving to a federal UK in the next few years. So we need to be very careful that it's not just about that negotiation in Brussels. It's really about how we make the UK work, especially for the environment. Okay, so that's kind of the scene in Brussels, in London, but I think in Brussels as well we need to consider what's happening. The UK has been hindering a few environmental policies at EU level in the past. Soils Directive. The UK has been also at the forefront, the UK government, past UK government, about getting rid of the Birds and Habitats Directive. These kind of things. And so if you talk to environmentalists across Europe, there's some who say it's actually quite good that the UK is out of the picture. In terms of pushing a very quite neoliberal argument, the idea of cutting environmental red tape. But on the other hand, the UK was leading the way in terms of greening agricultural policy. The UK was a key leader in terms of climate change. So what happens to all of these areas of policies in which the UK was a leader? My gut feeling is that it will be much easier to find replacement laggards for the topics in which the UK was a laggard than finding replacement leaders. So I think what we need to realize is that at the time of divergence, it's actually possible that if Michael Gove, actually does what he's promised to do, and we have a greener agricultural policy here, we might have actually the cap getting less and less green in the rest of the EU. And that's going to create special problems here on this island, of course, because we might have a greener agricultural policy in the north and a less green agricultural policy in the south. Okay, so that's kind of the challenges as I see them. And if you have any questions,